My name is Michael, and I'm the Inside Communications Director for Human San Quentin. The contents of this episode include strong language and graphic descriptions of violent crimes that may include sexual assault. This podcast is intended for mature audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
Hello, and welcome to the Prison Podcast. I'm your host, Diane, Kahn, Executive Director of Humans of San Quentin, and we're grateful to have you with us today. The Prison Podcast brings forward the voice of survivors of violent crimes and their convicted offenders, unearthing stories excluded from public conversation. The podcast centers around the transformative process of the victim-offender dialogue, a facilitated meeting within a prison setting that brings together someone who has experienced harm and the person responsible for causing it. Each episode features a candid conversation with someone who has completed the extensive victim-offender dialogue program, offering profound insights into the power of vulnerability and self-reflection. By drawing back the curtain on the complex relationships forged by harm, the Prison Podcast provides a platform for healing, empathy, and understanding. Unlike traditional true crime media, the podcast emphasizes personal agency and the journey of reconciliation, transformation, societal attitudes, and fostering emotional connections. Through these powerful conversations, we hope to inspire individual change, promoting healing within our communities, and support a more compassionate understanding of justice. This season, we've shared stories of resilience, hope, and transformation, and today's episode is no exception. We're thrilled to bring you the story of Elle, a remarkable mother who turned unimaginable tragedy into a journey of healing and advocacy. In this episode, we speak with Elle, who tragically lost her daughter, Emily, in a devastating accident caused by a drunk driver, Alan. As a mother myself, I'm deeply moved and proud to share Elle's story with you. During Alan's sentencing, Elle stood in the courtroom broken but determined, ensuring accountability for the devastating loss of her daughter. But her courage didn't stop there. Seeking healing, Elle took the extraordinary step of participating in the victim-offender dialogue, sitting face-to-face with Alan, the man responsible for the tragedy. What followed was a powerful encounter where Elle's path to healing intersected with Alan's journey to redemption. Drawing from her own family history of trauma and alcoholism, Elle was able to see beyond Alan's actions to the pain in his past. Together, they began a process of mutual understanding and healing. In this episode, Elle shares her incredible journey, how she moved from grief and anger to advocacy and forgiveness, and how she became a trailblazer in victim impact discussions with people incarcerated. Her story is a testament to the power of empathy, courage, and transformation. I'm so proud to share Elle's wisdom and strength with you today. Hi, Elle.
Hi, Diane. It is wonderful to be with you, and I can't wait to tell the story.
Can you tell us about your daughter and what she was like growing up and the kind of woman she was becoming as she found her way in the world?
Well, I had asked for a strong-willed child, a strong-willed girl. When you ask for things like that, you usually don't understand what that means, because I got exactly that. She was strong-willed. I guess she was maybe 8, and I told her to put a sweater on because it was cold that day. She was getting ready to go to school. And she puts her hands on her hips and she says, "Mama, I'm not going to wear a sweater because you're cold." And that pretty much characterized our relationship. I had to pick my battles, and a lot of things really didn't matter, like how she dressed. She just was into layers and colors and patterns, and she always looked like a little hippie. I met her once. I picked her up from the airport, and I was watching her come down hallway towards me, and her hair is all up and falling and beautiful, and she's wearing multiple layers on top, and she's wearing flannel pajama bottoms and a tutu over the flannel pajama bottoms. And I just thought how incredibly beautiful she was, and how happy I was that she was free enough in her spirit to dress like that. Oh, and I forgot she was wearing her UGG boots. So she had her flannel pajama bottoms, which I think they were a Christmas pattern, tucked inside her UGG boots. So, I mean, she was like a vision. And she used to call me and say, she used to call me, and this is still hard. She used to call me and say, Mama, do you want to hear a poem I just wrote? As if I would ever say no. And then she would read me this poem, and I'd end up just feeling jealous because she was a wordsmith. She had this wonderful way of choosing the right word. And I'd have tears dripping off my chin because her stuff was very moving. I'm a poet. And I just would feel jealous because I think, oh, that's such a good, I wish I had said that. And she was my biggest fan and I was hers. And we had a rough time. She got involved with someone who was very abusive to her, very much like her father was with me. And she was madly in love with him. And I watched her give up her life for this guy. And I felt like I could tear him limb from limb. I was so angry at him. And I knew what her future held if she stayed with him. But I could not speak to that because I had lived my life. So we butted heads. I kind of had a near-death thing happen once. I was driving my car down the road and I hear a crash and I look up and here's this car coming right straight for me from across the way. The guy had run into a post and bounced off, and he was coming across right towards me. He would have hit me right on my door. I managed to pull off the road and he missed me, but I sat there and I thought, I was just aware of how quick that happened. And when I told her about it, it's so funny to think of that, because what happened to her then was she realized that my life, our lives, that our lives could be taken. I could be taken from her. And she called me and said that she had this epiphany. We always called each other with our epiphanies. And she said, I had this epiphany, Mom, about you, that way before you were a mother, my mother, you were a woman. And you walked on the beach and you danced and you laughed and you deserve my respect. And at that moment, there was this shift in our relationship. I continued to be her mother, continued to offer suggestions for how she should live her life. And where before she would be resistant and we'd butt heads or whatever, she would say, I hear you, Mom, and I know you're telling me that because you love me. And that's what I lost.
I'm sorry.
I was really, really super proud of her. She managed to break away from the fellow, and her and her friend Kelsey, which this is the two of them, I don't know. They were sister friends. They called themselves soulmates. And they decided one day, and they worked together and had different restaurant jobs. And when she went to California, she was 22 and Kelsey was 20. She was 24 when she was killed. And I was so proud of her for having the courage to go. And I felt like it was again, so many times in our lives together, there was a point in time when I knew that if I held on, I would lose her. And that if I didn't get on board with her, the quality of our relationship would change. And I, more than anything, wanted to have a relationship with my daughter. Mm-hmm. So I did the best that I could inside with all the fears that I had about them going and what were they going to do. And she and Kelsey and her brother Josh, I'll show you a picture of Josh. They went out to California. They decided they wanted to live in Pacific Beach. And they went to California and they found an apartment and they both found jobs. And that's Joshy.
Oh,
this is my favorite picture of them. And they probably are smoking pot. I mean, I'm pretty sure they are. They loved music. They were best friends. This is the last time we saw her live. It was Thanksgiving 2008. She dyed her hair black. And when I saw her, I was like, because I have all these pictures of her. She used to have like auburn hair. She always did that red color that's so gorgeous. And so we have lots of her hair. You want to hear a poem she wrote?
I do.
Okay. This was in 2006. It's like ripping away warmth on a cold night. It never gets any easier to watch them leave me standing at the gate. My love comes pouring out, reminding me where my center really is with my family. I miss them so much already, it hurts. And I can't keep the tears from pouring out. I try to be strong. But the second I think of them, my eyes burn and my soul starts to ache.
Oh, Elle, that's something you could write about her today.
I want to hold my mama's face, see my brother smile, and give Daddy another hug. I feel so blessed to love their company so much, but cursed at the same time to be a gypsy at heart. I love to travel, and I'm truly happy in California, but leaving Josh, Dad, and Mom, Grammy, and Nikki never gets easier. And I doubt if I'll ever be any better at saying goodbye. And so I started thinking of goals for myself. I want to go to Europe when I'm 25. That gives me 2 years to plan and save. Coming to California gave me confidence to strive for more. I'll get a jar and start a fund. I'm going to Europe. And she did.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah. There was a depth in our relationship.
What do you mean?
It wasn't a surface thing. There was a soul thing, a love of music, a love of the written word, a love of art, a love of sunrises and sunsets and the ocean and poetry. And we, the three of us, my son and daughter and myself, we walked through fire together. Their father was abusive, and he didn't know any other way. It was how he was raised. He tried really hard. The first time we went to California, I ran away from home with them. Emily was 2 and Josh was 8. And we got one-way tickets and told their dad that we were going on a 2-week vacation, knowing that we weren't coming back.
Wow, that's heavy.
Yeah. I wasn't a perfect mom, but I was good enough.
Yeah, doing your best, right?
And I wish that I could have, wishes were horses beggars would ride. But, there are things that I wish that I could have saved them from. But she was grace to me. She had grace.
Oh my gosh, you just had me in tears for a long time now.
that effect on people. It's a gift I have. We joke about it because when I go inside and tell the story, I see all these great big men, like with their heads down like this and wiping tears away. And the first couple of times I felt bad. And then I realized that it's a good thing to be able to tell a story that moves someone from their head to their heart. That's a long distance. And to have a story and tell a story that helps people feel is not a bad thing.
And it's a feat inside prison where they're guarded, right? They don't have that opportunity ever. They're never alone. The majority that I've met have never really been taught how to share those emotions. And to hear it from someone, especially like you, has been I don't know that I would even call you, I don't know what the terminology you use, but the victim or just someone on the other side of destructive behavior. To give them the opportunity to let go and let their hair down and just cry for what they want to cry for, whatever that is. Yeah, that's beautiful.
You can never be prepared for something like this, I don't think. Although I talked to her the Thursday night, it would have been the 5th of February. She called and we'd watched the movie Into the Wild about Chris McCandless. We'd watched the movie together, and we'd read the book. And my book club we had just had our meeting about the book, and she was calling to see what the women's reactions were. A lot of several of them didn't understand and thought it was really a bad thing that he did, and so we talked about that and how it's just such a good conversation. Never imagining it would be my last conversation with her. But we were getting ready to hang up, and she goes, "Oh, Mom, I had a dream last night. Can I tell you about it?" And I said, "Sure." She said, "I dreamt I was outside my body looking down." And of course, the first thing I thought of is that happens when your soul leaves your body. So I had a moment. I mean, I couldn't say that to her. How could I say that to her? I could hardly acknowledge it myself. So I said, a lot of times dreams are not about the obvious thing. Think about it. Is there a dream that you have that you're not pursuing, or something that you want to do, and that's how the conversation ended. And then it was Thursday, Sunday night, her soul was outside of her body looking down. And she came to me. I got the call at about 10:30, and it was Kelsey's mom said, "Emmy's been in an accident. You need to call this number." And it was Scripps La Jolla. I see you. And they said she's on a ventilator and you need to get here as fast as you can. And I asked them, I said, "Please don't let her be by herself. Tell her I'm on my way, but don't let her be by herself, please." And so then, I called my brother and my son and friends of mine. I had a job that I had to have coverage for, so I had to have people come over and get access to my files and a lot of just stuff like that. And so I'm in my room and I'm getting ready, and all of a sudden she's just there. I know she's there. I'll put my hands on my heart and close my eyes, and I just say to her, I'm on my way. I'm on my way. And if you can wait for me, but if you can't, know that you take my love with you wherever you go forever. And she said, I didn't hear audible words, but in my heart and my soul, I heard her say, "It's okay, Mama. It's okay." And then she was gone. I didn't make the connection then that meant that she was gone, because I couldn't make that connection yet. And so my background is speech and language pathology, and I had done, studied traumatic brain injuries and what you have to do to help people regain their language. And so I had all these plans, and I called Kelsey and I said, surround her with everything that she loves, her blanket, her stuffed animals, put pictures on the wall, have music, because those things are important. Her death was, I call it the line of demarcation in my life. So there's the time before Emily died, and then there's the time after Emily died. And everything shifted, everything changed in that moment. Yeah, I get lost sometimes in the story.
Yeah. Okay, so not that you want to replay this day in your head, but I would like to venture into that a little bit, and then obviously get into your relationship with Alan, who's now in prison, and what that has turned into for you. If you want to tell us what happened that day.
When I got to the hospital, in the corridor outside ICU, there were probably 12, 15 young people standing in little clumps up and down the hallway. Well, I didn't know who they were. I just noticed them, and then go in the door and, go around a corner and see her in the bed, and realize that up until that moment, I had been entertaining the idea that she was still there. And immediately when I saw her, I knew that she was gone.
How did she get hit?
She was in a crosswalk. Here's the thing. Her friend Kelsey told me later that Emily had told her that it was the most beautiful day ever. And it's a line from a radio. They were like total Radiohead junkies. I mean, they loved Radiohead. There's a line that in one of their songs about no matter what happens, today has been the best day ever. And Emily told Kelsey that. And it was just a day where she got up and had breakfast, and then went with one of her coworkers, Babs, to get a cat. And so she went and got a cat, and she worked for a little while. And then her and her friends sat on the wall on the beach watching the sunset, and she had a beer. I don't know if she had a beer, because at that time she had migraines sometimes when she drank, so she wasn't drinking. So she was ready for bed, and her friend Kat, she talked about all the time when she called me. Emily just adopted Kat. She loved Kat, and Kat called and said, come and have dinner with me. So Emily got dressed and went to the Starbucks and had dinner with Kat. And when she was walking home, she was in the crosswalk walking. Alan and his friend had been in this bar diagonally across from the Starbucks. He was homeless when this happened. He and his buddy had just gotten to Pacific Beach like 2 days before. They worked a day job and got paid, and they took the money and bought beer. And instead of finding a place to live, they were at a campsite, and they shared a 12-pack. And then they had 3 pitchers of beer at the bar. And his friend had him drive the truck, and he didn't see her. She was in the crosswalk, and he didn't see her, and he hit her and threw her 16 feet through the air. And she died of blunt force trauma in the street in front of the Starbucks. And I was in Florida. It was 10:30, and I was thinking I should call her. And then I thought, no, I was really tired. I would call her the next day. And for a long time, I had so much regret, because I thought, well, if I had called her, she would just have stayed sitting there, and maybe she would have told me about this big red Dodge truck that roared by. But But then the other thing was, if I had called her, the timing would have been as the accident was happening and I might have heard it, which is not something I would have been able to live with. Yeah, so the fire department who came was the one down the street that she used to take coffee to every once in a while. She would tell me that her big thing for the day, her kindness for the day, was taking coffee to the firemen down the street. And then there was Kat, who thought it was her fault and who for years lived with this guilt and shame about what she'd done to her friend. And Kelsey, who was expecting Emily any minute, and Emily doesn't come home and doesn't answer her phone. And Kelsey finally gets dressed and goes out and finds her best friend in the street. And who for years afterward, every time she would try and call someone that she loved and they didn't call her back, would have horrible panic attacks and have to call her mom. And her mom would have to talk to her until she got a hold of herself. I still have this thing. Just the other day it happened. I couldn't get a hold of my son. He was shopping and didn't have reception, but I didn't know that. So that weird thing is happening where it sounds like somebody's on the line, but they're not there. And I'm starting to get really nervous, and I say something like, oh no, you know. And he calls me a few minutes later and he said, Mom, why are you so upset? I was just in public shopping. And I realized I still go to that place.
Gosh, I'm speechless.
Once you know something, like not just the rug, the world was pulled out from underneath me. I realized we live in bubbles and we think we're protected and we think everything is, but nothing like that will ever happen. And we're not protected. Bad things happen. Her dad said to me, he said, he wasn't asking why it happened to him because he thought, why shouldn't it happen to us? It happens to everybody. It happens to other people. Why shouldn't it be us? What makes us different? What makes us special that we can think that we'll be protected? And so I learned how to carry it. I just learned how to carry it. It doesn't go away. It doesn't change, but you learn how to carry it with grace. You learn how to carry it so that you can move through the world and have a life, and so that you can be used and so that you can love people. And yeah, the worst thing that happened to me in my life has ended up bringing me the most life.
Yeah, amazing how you've channeled something, literally, like you said, the worst thing that can happen in your life to something so positive and beautiful. No, I've had the opportunity to talk and sit with Ellen, and you use that word angel, and he uses that. And the, thousands of people that you've touched and the talks that you've given and the hope you instill is just, it's gorgeous in so many ways. Born from such hurt. So I just look up to you.
I'm nobody special. I just know that if I could do it, anybody can do it. The first I found myself, the rage was frightening, the anger that I felt. And I watched myself losing control and actually lost control in the grocery store buying pumpkin seeds. And I yelled at this little old lady. I didn't have a lot of money, and I only had enough money for pumpkin seeds at half price. And I told her they were half price, and she rang them up full price. And I just went berserk. I watched myself. The whole time I had this, there's an observer part of us that's like unemotional and then like is watching things happen, which was very helpful during the time we were in the hospital with her. And I knew what I was doing, and I watched her like shrink, like her head is down, and I can't stop, and I don't want to stop. And I finally, the manager comes, and and I'm starting to calm down a little bit, but I get my bag of pumpkin seeds at the price I want to pay. And I get in the car, and I'm like, I know what it's like to be on the receiving end of rage. And I did not want to do that to anybody.
And how long was she gone at that point?
About 1.5 years.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. The first year, we were back and forth to California. For every time he was in court, we were in court, me and Josh and all of her friends. We filled up the courtroom. And when we were there, we were like together. They would most of them worked for Starbucks, so they'd all get together and work out their schedules so that everybody could be at something at some time. You could be at the trial from 9 to 12. And then, it was just amazing how they did it. And then we'd have barbecues and music, and we went to Balboa State Park, and we just did all this stuff. And then there was the last thing was the sentencing, and I think that was in October. And then when I went home, there was no more. It was like over, and that's when the bottom just fell out of everything. And that's when it got really, really dark.
So your reason to be at these sentencings was to make sure that he was convicted and sent to prison?
My reason for being there was to represent Emily. People in Florida said, you don't have to go, you don't have to go. And I'm like, how can I not go? That's my daughter. How can I not go? I had no, okay, here's the deal, Diane. My family is alcoholic. I was raised with alcoholism. My father was an alcoholic. He worked at a brewery in Indiana and came home every day drunk when I was a baby. First 9 years of my life. Every day, drunk. Sometimes passing out drunk. All my uncles were alcoholics. Pictures of my father's family. He was 13 of 15. My uncles have big beer bellies. All of them. They all drank. 2 of my uncles drank themselves to death. One sitting at the kitchen table. My brothers were alcoholics. So I know about alcoholism. And I knew when I heard that it was a drunk driver that hit her, there's things I knew about him before I even knew his name. You don't drink to that extent. It was his 7th DUI and his 3rd felony. And you don't drink that way unless you have unmanageable pain. So this I knew about him.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember the first time hanging up the phone and knowing, and I thought to myself, someday I'm going to have a conversation with this guy. So where I am now came out of my conversation with him, which was almost 10 years to the day after Emily died. And until then, how I felt about him was I didn't say his name. If I talked about what happened, I said the man who took Emily's life, the man responsible for Emily's life. I decided the year after he was sentenced that I would not give him any more of me. So I didn't want to think about him. I didn't say his name. But always in the back of my mind, I wanted this conversation with him because I wanted to understand. I wanted to understand who he was and what happened in his life. That was really, really important to me. And of course, it's not possible. And it happened when it was supposed to happen. And I had taken care of my mom for 3 years, the last 3 years of her life. And then I got to come to Gilroy, California to stay the summer with my nephew and be a nanny for my niece. And I decided, well, now's a good time to have a conversation. So I called CDCR and got put in touch with the HIMSA, who put me in touch with Martina, and we started the process of having the conversation. So they have to go and talk to him before to see if he's a candidate for a VOD, because some people aren't. And so they were going to go the next day to interview him. So I woke up in the middle of the night and I was thinking about it, and I was thinking that if he had the courage to face me, to sit across the table from me and have a conversation, that showed a lot of courage. And it said more about who he was then than when he took her life. And in thinking that, he became a human being for me. And of course, when he was interviewed, he said, I've been waiting for this. And Martina said he just broke down and cried. And so then my whole perspective of him was different. I was talking to a friend and she finally asked me, who's Alan? And I said, he's the man who killed Emily. And she goes, I've never heard you say his name before. So there was this shift. And I think all of us have to do that shift where they go from monster to human being. But it was funny how fast it happened. And so then we worked and wrote letters back and forth. And then I went to San Quentin on January 15th, 2019. We had all agendas and plans and goals and all this stuff. And he's an hour late. And I'm standing there thinking, I have nothing. I can't remember anything on the agenda. I don't know what I'm going to do. I have no idea about anything. And my support person says, you'll be okay. Just trust the process. Everything's going to be good. And then Martina comes around the door and she says, he's here. Are you ready? And I said, yes. And we stand up and everybody backs away from me. Then he's in the doorway. And here's this man he's small in stature and he's like hunched over and his head is down and he looks scared, disheveled, and his face is gray. He looks like a prisoner. And the only thing I have in my mind was, I have a hug for you. Do you want it? Which I say that to people. And he said, yes, ma'am, I do. And he stepped towards me and I stepped towards him and I embraced him and he cried on my shoulder. And I cried with him and comforted him and held him. And he sat down and he said, don't you want to hit me? And I said, nope, I don't. He said, I can't really wrap my mind around this. And I said, I can't either. But how about if we just go with it? Let's just go with it and say yes. So then we just had a conversation. One of the things I wanted from him, two things, was that he look at these pictures and that he tell me about his childhood. So, no, and I also wanted it to be lighthearted. I don't even know where that came from. I had no idea, lighthearted, but it was lighthearted. And I wanted there to be laughter because that's important. And there was laughter. And I guess I say all this because I want you to know the process and the journey that we went through, because it's significant. And when he told me the story, he'd written a timeline for the GRIP program, and so he was going over that with me, and I was learning about him. And, the focus victim-offender dialogues is always with the victim. It's what the victim wants, what the victim needs. But while he was telling me the shift, it was a shift in me where it was not so much about me anymore. It was about him. Because his childhood was tragic. And it made so much sense that he would be drinking and that he would have done what he did. And it's not an excuse, and I don't excuse the behavior. But I think any of us, if we had lived through what he lived through, would have significant difficulties. And I watched during the 5 hours that we were together, his countenance changed. There was a light in his face. His cheeks were rosy. His eyes were sparkling. His stature was different. He was funny. He's a funny guy. I don't know if you got to see that, but he's a funny guy. And it was like watching love do its work right before our eyes. It was incredible. And in the end, in the last few minutes, Martina said, well, we need to decide how to go forward. And Alan must have planned for that because he had a little piece of paper. I had a picture for him of that one that I showed you of me and Emily, but I couldn't give it to him then. I had to send it to him. But he had a piece of paper that he'd written his address on, which he was not allowed to do, but he kind of just quickly slipped it over to me. And so we decided just to correspond. And somehow I got put on his visitors list, which is totally against the rules, somewhat of a miracle. So then we just spent time every once in a while. I consider him a friend. I don't know what the parameters of our relationship will be now, because I'm still Emily's mom. And I don't know how much I can be a part of his life. I don't know how that's going to work or what it's going to look like. And, sometimes he and his mom are like, what you did for him. But I always tell them, Alan did the work. I may have spoken up for him, but Alan has done the work. So if anybody saved Alan, he saved himself. And that's so important because I refuse to have that. I refuse that designation or that whatever. I don't know if that makes sense.
It does. I see you as you came to him with, and it's amazing you use that word, meeting someone for the first time that had given you, what you'll never, ever get over from, death. And here you say that there's this love that unfolded between us. And I talked to him about that. And I told him that he had to go to the darkest place he's ever been. And he had to choose to dismantle all those experiences that happened to him. And there's not many people in this life that do it. There's a lot that I talk to in prison, but a lot that just can't, and they don't have the resources to. And I think especially out here with men, they're not taught to go there. Those people that brought you up, that you had that innate love for, and you have to turn on them and look at that and then grow from love from that. So you're right. He did that hard work, but you came to him with love and forgiveness and showed him that there is a light to better, which has to be the steam and that engine for him.
I'm proud of him.
Yeah.
Because he could have chosen the other way.
And especially you've seen the other side of people that don't go to prison or potentially don't ever address what that hurt is, or that, how that addiction is involved in their life. And you've seen a life continue without doing what he's done. Tell me about the pictures and sharing them with him of Emily in the hospital.
Well, let me tell you about, at one point, Noel, he is a Yoruba priest, a real spiritual guy. And we had a lot of conversation about death and the meaning of death. And because I stayed at he and his wife's Airbnb prior to my conversation, he said, so you two have been talking about Emily. What would you think about talking to her? Because of course she was there. And Alan said, you go first. And we had a laugh about that. And I had my hand on the table And I just bowed my head. And, you know, it was like, I don't remember what I said, but I remember like being, I don't even remember. It was, I don't even remember. But Alan reached across the table and took my hand, which he was not supposed to do. He was not supposed to do that. But he did. And it was just, there was a sweetness. And I don't remember what he said to Emily. And then it's time to show the pictures, and he's crying, and Kathleen is comforting him, and Noel gets up and walks around and puts his arm across his back, and I just, you know, start in with the pictures and telling the stories that go along with the pictures, and he's sobbing, and I think that was the hardest thing. I think it was probably easier for him to talk about the abuse that he suffered than it was to see the picture. And he said something like, he hated that he would have those pictures in his mind forever. And I said something like, this is part of it. You have to let go of that and let it be what it is now. You know, that happened then, but this is now. But I suspect that, Mon, he's told me. I've been working with him on his parole, and I spoke at the parole board hearing and his Ann Bank hearing, and I've written multiple letters to the governor, and it's very emotionally, the word taxing comes to mind, but it's very emotional doing this and talking about it. I love it because it keeps her real. That's why I love going inside and showing these pictures and talking about her. And then sometimes being able to go back and the guys remember her and talk about, and they call her M. And somebody at Mule Creek, when I was there the last time, wrote on the whiteboard, "In loving remembrance of Emily."
Oh my gosh. Yeah, Mule Creek State Prison in California. Yeah, because what you do, people don't do. People are afraid. I have a lot of people look at me like, why do you go in there? They're afraid that, you know, my house, my things are going to get stolen, bad things are going to happen to me. You're going to bodily injury. So people are so consumed with fear that for someone like me who's giving a service and teaching and interviewing and humanizing, but someone like you actually goes to the heart of why they're there, and they can, you know, feel you. And you know, as I often say, I haven't met someone in prison who wasn't a victim first. Right? They're you and embodied in a lot of different aspects. So, and I've even talked to one of the guys on our team, our office admin inside Hano, Elle, who knows you as well and knows your daughter. And it's amazing. It's amazing that you're willing to do that.
It is my honor to do it. There's not a molecule in my body that's not way the fuck more than willing. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and I think about what I do, and I remember some of the faces and the stories. And I am so filled with gratitude that I feel I could float right straight up through the roof.
People think we are crazy for that. And I feel the same way. And I don't feel like I can say it to many people, I'm honored to be able to walk into San Quentin.
I know.
But people don't understand that you and I are not the norm.
Would you have it any other way?
No, I live my life to go into prisons around the world and hear their voices and see them and sit with them, you know, feet to the fire and talk and hear it. And people always say, well, Diane, how can you take that negativity and that burden? And for me, it's a gift that they're able to sit there with me and they're sharing, right? CNN and the world already knows how bad they are. And then they're willing to sit there and be vulnerable and tell me what's happened to them. It's a gift that they open that door for me. So, but people need to hear it from your side, right? You've got a special situation where, I don't know how you feel about that victim word, but
I'm kin of a victim, mother of a victim, and in a sense, a survivor. I survived grief. has survived loss, but I like healing partner best of all. That pretty much defines who I am now at this point in my life, a healing partner. I partner with them. The first time I went to Soledad, so my conversation with Alan was in January of 2019. And then, I got to go to his grip graduation, right?
You surprised him.
I know, it was amazing. I see him like crawling over people, holding on to his cap because he's wearing cap and gown. He's like crawling over people to get to me. And I had just spoken to the warden and I said, so what about hugs? Because that's my big thing. And she puts her hand down by her belly button and kind of does a little like shake, like only where nothing. And so I say, okay, and I turn around and here he's coming towards me. And he just throws his arms around me and gives me a big hug. And I said, in his ear, I said, Alan, you're not supposed to be doing this. You could get in trouble. And he looks me in the face and goes, what are they going to do? Put me in prison? So that was my first time being on the inside with guys. And they asked me to speak. I was the first survivor, kin of victim, whatever, who'd been asked to do that. And I'm standing at the podium looking at 140 guys in caps and gowns, all in rows, And I'm just like, there is no place on the face of this earth I'd rather be than right there where I was, with a couple pictures of Emily.
Yeah.
It was amazing. And I just fell in love with them. And I told them, I said, you guys look way cooler in your caps and gowns than you do in that blue, and we just laughed. And oh my God, what a time that was. And he was sitting off behind me to one side, and I kept turning because I knew the story for me is like a triumph, but for him, this is what he did. And I kept looking at him, and Jacques, guy who started grip, he was standing behind me. He just had his hand on my back, like support while I was sharing. And I kept turning, and he motioned for Alan to come and stand with me. So Alan and I are standing at the podium. And also I told them something changed in me leading up to the VOD. I became this person that I had always dreamt of being. I was bold. I told Martina, I want to give Alan his honor cord. And she goes, I said, well, find out how I can do that. And somebody came over to me and she said, well, I guess you can do it. Well, just you stand here. And so I was able to give him his honor cord for graduating from the grip program, which I will show you that picture. That's
oh my gosh. Are you in the chapel or in the visiting room?
The little room where we had our VOD we went through that into the little room so they let me give him his honor cord, and the guys were like, ah! And I'm funny. I crack jokes. Sometimes I say fuck, which really makes them laugh, which I love when they laugh when I say fuck. Like, they don't believe a little old gray-haired white lady says fuck, but I do. It's one of my favorite words. And I don't apologize anymore because my mom is dead and she doesn't know. So
you can't let your hair down in there, right? Like, people don't understand that they social distance long before COVID ever hit. And they have us pretty much on a pedestal because they can do things to us that will put them in the hole or solitary confinement. So there is this already, I don't know what you call it, but just this aura of them being on their best behavior. So when someone like you comes in and is real and free with yourself and using those words, it's just like, oh, yes, I'm here. It's real. So it's definitely cathartic.
I love it. When I went to Soledad, I didn't know what to expect. Victim impact panel. So when I have my book, this is what I used for my victim impact statement of the sentencing part of the trial. This is what I showed the jury and the judge. And so I've just added to it since then. So I'm going in a victim impact panel. I'm not sure I'm going to tell a story. And they tell me, they talk about not hugging and, but I don't remember them telling me a lot of rules. So I walk into this room and I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid at all. probably because I've already been to San Quentin twice, and both times were beautiful. So I don't have I'm not carrying any fear about it. But I walk in and here's these guys. There were 19 of them in a circle. And I see their faces when I walk in. They just look so happy to see me. So I just put my hand out and walk around the circle and just touch palms like you do, just, not thinking anything about it. And then I think Martina probably said, don't do this stuff like that. And then they go around the circle and they're talking about, they say their name, the name of their victim, and how many years they were sentenced. And the whole thing came to like all of their sentences together, like 800 years or something, a huge amount. They say that. And I just feel this love for them, this compassion for them. And when I show the pictures and tell them about Emily, they're crying. I'm not used to men crying. I said, I got to tell you guys, I'm not used to men crying tears, and your tears are precious to me. I will take your tears with me, and I do. And I'm talking about Emmy being on the ventilator, and I'm showing those pictures, and this young Vietnamese man, he leans out of the circle and he says, I hear you say the words love wins. But when I look at the picture of Emily on the ventilator, it reminds me of my victim who was on a ventilator. And he turns to me, and the anguish on his face is palpable. You can feel it is emanating from him. He says, can you help me? And I'm like stunned. And in this moment, I think, what do I have to give him? What? And I say, I have a hug for you if you want it. And he stands up and I walk over to him and I just hold him. And he's sobbing into my shoulder. And I don't remember what I said. I never remember what I say, except that you're loved. But I see him as he was before whatever happened to him happened. The little boy that was full of life. And I look at him and I wipe his tears away and I hold his face in my hands and I tell him how loved he is. And it's just this moment that's transcendent. If nothing ever happened to me again, other than that moment, it would have been enough. So then I go and I hug all these guys, right, in this line. And I do the same thing. I get to hold their faces and I tell them how loved they are. And I see them as they were when they were little boys. And it's a gift. I feel like I carry the spirit of the great good mother with me. And she is so fucking real. It's not even funny. All of us are loved. It's real. And he slips me a note at the graduation and says, he said, my mother's been dead for a long time. And when you talked to me, I heard you in the voice of my mother. And when he got out, he called me and we stayed in touch for a little while, and he called me Miss Elle. They always call me Miss Elle or Mama Bear. And they always talk about how much they get from me coming. And I always try and tell them, I get as much as you get from being here with you.
Yeah, they've been cast away. Our society has cast them away and put them in a 9-by-4-foot cell, at least in the U.S., or pretty close to that, if not smaller. They're treated like hell. And they already have all that guilt, shame, remorse, trauma, all on their shoulders. Yeah, that's beautiful work you do.
I love them so much, all of them.
Which is not necessarily normal.
I know.
I can't say that to people that I love them because they're not seen as humans, or yes, they intentionally did or didn't do what they did, and they did, and they need to go pay the price for that. The institutions need to keep popping up so we can put them there.
Here's the thing about that. One thing I realized, nothing they did to Alan, they could have put it death sentence, hanging, firing squad, whatever, wiped him off the face of this earth, put him in solitary in a hole in the ground somewhere. Nothing they could do to him would bring Emily back for 1 second. And all I was left with is who The question I ask myself is, who do you want to be? How do you want to show up with this? Nothing's going to bring her back. It doesn't matter what his sentence is. I wanted him off the street so he couldn't hurt anybody else. That was my thing. Make sure he doesn't do this, whatever that means. And I wasn't happy or sad about the sentence he got. But nothing would bring her back. So who do I want to be? How do I want to show up in the world? And I made a choice I actually woke up in the middle of the night. The first night I was in Pacific Beach in a hotel room. And I woke up, sat up in the bed saying out loud, I choose life, I choose life, I choose life, over and over again. And looking back at it now, it's like something in my spirit knew this is a crossroads, Elle. And for whatever minute it meant at that moment, I set my course by saying that. And it's taken all these years to flesh itself out, but I'm glad I chose life.
Yeah, and you're doing beautiful work because of it and impacting so many people on a beautiful healing journey. It's amazing. So, yeah, I'm on the same path you are, where I want to get in there and I want to hear it. And I want those voices to be shared, to demystify and humanize. And it's a lot. And I'm the same way you do. People are like, you've got to write this stuff down, Diane. We've got to share it with the world. You're learning this. We have to learn it with you. And it's like, well, I was just in San Quentin today. What do you want to know?
I feel like we're kindred spirits.
Well, I'm absolutely moved by everything you shared today. Healing comes to me after I've been speaking with you. I think about the word love. I think about your forgiveness. I picture you with those men inside prison and hugging them and holding their face. I think of all the sympathy and compassion you have for Alan and where he's been and where he is today. So I just want to thank you for the gift that you've given of healing to me and everybody listening. And I'm just in awe of what you've done. So thank you so much for giving your time.
Well, Diane, it has been wonderful to spend this time with you. I love sharing our story. I love talking about love and how it wins in so many ways. And I am so grateful for the work that I have been given to do. Emily's death continues to nourish me, and it continues to nourish many others. And I'm grateful. Thank you for this time. And you're a joy.
As we close, what resonates most deeply with me is Elle's extraordinary compassion. Growing up with an alcoholic father, she showed an innate curiosity about his trauma, seeking to understand rather than judge. From the very beginning, her heart was open. That same curiosity and compassion seems to me that it has become the foundation of her life's work. Elle's story is one of transformation, resilience, and profound forgiveness. In her raw and vulnerable moments with Alan, her compassion tore down walls, allowing both of them to confront their deepest fears and truths. Her work within prison walls is far more than storytelling. It's about forging connections, fostering healing, and remaining every individual with their own inherent self-worth. I can relate to Elle's love for the people she meets inside, and it shines through, showing that compassion, when paired with action, can bridge even the widest divides. In finding this purpose, Elle has become a partner in healing, giving as much as she receives. Her choice to embrace life despite immense grief is a testament to the boundless strength of the human spirit. Its ability to grow, understand, and find peace, even in the most challenging circumstances. Thank you for joining us today. Make sure to tune in next week for an extraordinary episode of the Prison Podcast. We'll be speaking with Alan, the man responsible for the death of Elle's daughter, Emily. Alan courageously participated in a victim offender dialogue with Elle, sharing his perspective on rehabilitation, his journey to sobriety, and his efforts to seek forgiveness while healing from his own trauma. Now incarcerated at San Quentin, Alan's story is one of accountability, redemption, and the complexities of finding humanity, even in the darkest moments. You won't want to miss this deeply moving conversation. See you next week. Meanwhile, be kind to yourself.